Luke Becker, welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. Appreciate you having me.
Yes, sir. I'm excited. Minnesota's been a loyal listener base for the podcast, so always good to have a Gopher on. And man, you were at Minnesota during literally some of the best seasons for team races in NCAA history. Were you at the national duels that year Shelton Benjamin pinned West Hand?
I wasn't down there. I obviously growing up in Minnesota, I followed the team quite a bit, and but I didn't get the chance to be down there for that one.
That's a
That was
crazy one.
Yeah, that clip shows up every once in a while, and it's amazing the way the way that all turned out, man.
Well, I didn't know that Hartung had lost the match before that, and he was like Mr. Reliable for you guys.
Yeah, I think that's the only time I think him and Full Heart wrestled 9 times throughout their college career, and that was the only time that Hartung had lost to him.
Wow, man.
So, yeah.
And that's Full Heart. I mean, he beat Kale. He's been a national champ, so that shows how good Hartung was back then.
Yeah. He was the first one to kind of to come through and especially where he came from. He was he's a one-time state champ, wasn't a high recruit or anything like that, but he just had an unbelievable work ethic and a will to want to win. And he did whatever it took to get to the top, and he brought a lot of guys along with him. Him and Kraft and those guys were the first ones that started to believe that we could bring a championship here to Minnesota.
Yeah, and if you think about it, J-Rob had been there a long time. Like, people probably would have thought in the 80s that he would have got there earlier than 10 years. It took basically 10 years.
Yeah.
But the crazy part was that in 94, they were ranked number 1 in January. And then in I think there was another year, maybe 96, they were ranked number 1 in January. And things happened,
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy how, I know there were a couple times, I think it was the first time in the same weekend they had beat Iowa and Oklahoma State in the same weekend, and they were ranked number 1, but just there was a string of injuries and guys got sick and just some really weird things. And it's amazing how everybody, it's funny to listen to fans sometimes like, oh, geez, he looked terrible this weekend. Well, you have no idea what's going on in his life. And, whether he had the flu or he's got a bad rib or something like that. So it's, you really have to, there's a little bit of luck involved with staying healthy and, not getting sick at the wrong time to really be there and be able to compete at the end of the season the way you want to.
Yeah. And it just shows how long it takes to consistently put together something of a high, now we're so, if it doesn't happen in 2 years, 3 years, people are freaking out, and it's man, the great J-Rob, it took him a decade to get it to where he was. And then the next 15 was just, top 3, top 4, basically every year.
Yeah.
So, you're a multiple time state champ. When you graduated, wins leader for Minnesota, how did you get started in the sport?
I started, I just, when I think I was in the first grade, and I just like I did everything, back then, they just send a little flyer home with you from school, whether it was wrestling, hockey. And every time I got a flyer, I'd come running up the driveway and say, hey, can I join? And hockey was no. And I come running up with the wrestling flyer, and my mom says, absolutely not. We're not doing that. Well, my dad had wrestled for 1 year in 7th grade, I think. So he's like, well, let me see that. And he took a look at it, and it was that night. He's like, well, you better get changed. We better go. Went to the first practice, and there it was from there. It was wrestling from there on out.
And when did you get serious about it?
Pretty serious right away. I was fortunate enough to have some decent success, probably my second year on the state level. But once I started to have some success there, it was, wrestling was my sport. I played football too, all the way up, but it's kind of crazy now though. They wrestle year round now. I got a little son who's just kind of getting into it, but I wrestled, it was really 3-4 months out of the year. And when I grew up in Minnesota, especially in the Twin Cities, I think the outstates did some folk style, but I only did freestyle up until 7th grade. I never wrestled a folk style match till I got to 7th grade. Yeah. There just wasn't. It was the freestyle tournaments. That's all we did. There was no folk style season.
You didn't do a November through February winter, middle school state tournaments? Nothing?
Nope, there was nothing. Yeah.
What? There's a couple states you hear about where it's they wrestle. Utah actually does that. Up until middle school, it's predominantly freestyle.
Yeah. So it was, it's different. I'm starting to figure this whole thing out now that I have a son, but it's crazy. Now it's November to June, you know?
Right.
So
Well,
September to
man,
June.
if you're living up where you're at, you just drop them off at Pinnacle and just wipe your hands clean of it, man. They'll,
Yep.
they'll do
Yeah. Yeah.
those
That's
guys
kind
are
of
a high
nice.
level up there, man.
Yeah, they do such a great job. And obviously both of them were alumni of Minnesota here. And Jared and I came in the same class. We trained together, roomed together our entire college careers. So
wow.
It's pretty awesome to have those guys and be able to bring my son and just drop him off there.
Well, it's like from what I hear, like these, Minneapolis is such a big wrestling city. Like all the former Gophers, they're like, you might go to like a middle school practice and it's like D1 All-Americans coaching it. And
yeah,
I think it was St. Michael, that town alone like has like all of these like former like college All-Americans there and like running the club. So it's like seems like just like a wrestling hotbed up there.
Yeah, it is. And that's the the fortunate thing about being in the Twin Cities, the university being in the Twin Cities. When you graduate, there's a ton of opportunities, whether you stay in wrestling or get in the business world, and whatever it is, you can stick around and still be in the area. It's not a small college town where once you graduate and want to move on outside of wrestling, you got to go somewhere else. So kind of a fun story. So you mentioned St. Michael. So a lot of the guys that were the era below or behind us, those guys all kind of went out west to St. Michael. And over in Stillwater, Minnesota, where I live, there's 11 or 12 of us that wrestled in my era, all live within like 5-6 miles of each other. And all of our kids are wrestling out there. So you go to little youth practice and there's 4 or 5 of us in there. It's pretty awesome to have those guys to be in a practice and our kids are all wrestling together and training together. And it's pretty cool.
And so did you grow up near the Twin Cities or did you grow up out in the sticks?
I grew up about an hour outside of the Twin Cities, but back then, that was like a long way from the cities. Like if we went to the cities, it wasn't for a couple hours. It was like a whole day long trip. So it's a pretty small town out in country town, I'd say.
And so when you were coming up through the sport, is it Jennison was your high school coach?
Yep.
So was he like someone who really had a big impact on you, or was he kind of someone who was doing everything, like coaching a little football, coaching a little wrestling? What was his approach?
He did a lot of everything, but he's still the coach there, and he was always super involved with, from the youth program on up. Cause I think, to build a program and to bring guys along like you want to in a high school program, you got to be involved at some level. And, I think that was the great thing about him. And he also, with him, he was our 7th grade football coach. And every year, I don't know for how many years he coached that, but he probably brought on, even in my class, I think he brought on 3 or 4 guys from our 7th grade football team that he was like, man, those guys can tackle.
Yeah.
They're going to be good wrestlers. And he brings them along, and he did that for years. But that's what helped us to be such a successful team, because he'd get these guys to come in, and they were big parts of our team and winning matches and making it to state. And so he did a great job of sucking guys in, and that weren't just wrestling since they were, 6 years old. He'd find guys and pull them in the room and do a great job developing them.
Yeah. I was just talking to someone. I actually think it was Marcus Levesser, which is just ironic, but we were talking. I'm like, to have a decent high school program, you got to have someone on the football staff, whether it's like, it's best to have like the freshman football coach be like the heavyweight coach and like just get that pipeline going. Cause if not, you're not going to be able to pluck guys off like that.
Yeah, definitely. And especially for some of those, smaller towns, you need as many athletes as you can get. So pulling guys in. And like I said, those guys can be difference makers. And whether your team's making it to state or not, 1 or 2 guys makes a big difference if you can fill those gaps with great athletes. They may not know a ton about wrestling, but if you can get them in the room and they're good athletes and you can teach them a thing or two, it goes a long way.
Yeah. And it seems like everyone I talk to from Minnesota, is it the holiday tournament or the Christmas tournament?
Christmas tournament.
Everyone goes there. And I don't know how, I don't remember at this point, but we've had a bunch of Minnesota guys on within the past 6 months and they all talk about it. Did you guys go to that?
We did. Yeah.
Does anyone not go to this tournament?
Pretty much the best of the best. We try to get the best Minnesota teams in, and a few out-state teams. But I know, it's just we have 3 classes here in Minnesota. So it's really the tournament to kind of highlight and get the best guys together to see who's the best of the best in the state and surrounding states.
Did you have any battles there throughout the years?
Yeah, I did. I had a handful of them. I wrestled actually Todd Fuller. He was a national champ for North Dakota State back in the day. We had an overtime match actually my senior year at the Christmas tournament. So
wow,
he was a really tough guy, and that was a little bit too close for comfort, but.
And so were you wrestling, once you got into high school, 3-time state champ, were you only wrestling during the season, or were you going for 12 months a year at that point?
I played football, so I really took the football season off and just played football, but I'd wrestle through the season all the way through junior nationals. So
okay.
Probably more like 6-7 months, something like that. It wasn't really 12 months. There weren't clubs back then that were doing it year round as much. So it was just kind of a different thing than it is now. It seems like now you have to be going year round if you want to even be think about going to the next level. But back then it was like you had your season and freestyle season. I think that's what it was back when I was there. The guys who just wrestled in season, they were going to have a hard time making the next level if they weren't wrestling the freestyle
Mm-hmm.
Greco season. So that was kind of the guys that were committed to that were the guys that made it to that next level.
And when you're coming up, Minnesota hadn't gotten a trophy yet, but they still, I'm sure, were a massive kind of presence in the state. I mean, like, I don't think a lot of people realize just how popular the U is in Minnesota. Like, talk about like the impact of like Minnesota wrestling, like J-Rob and Marty when you were coming up.
Yeah, it was pretty. Jay was he was an innovator, man. He was trying to not just help our program win a national title or be as good as we could. He was trying to develop the sport, and build a sport. So we had, when I was I can't remember if I was a junior or senior, he had what he created, the Minnesota Wrestling Weekly. So it was a weekly wrestling not a podcast, but weekly wrestling show that would air on like Channel 45, the local news channel. And they'd cover all the local tournaments and some of that stuff. So that was really, there wasn't the streaming, anything like that. So you really didn't know what was going on until the newspaper came out a week, 2 weeks later. So that wrestling, Minnesota Wrestling Weekly show that he put on, that's where he kind of followed everything. And half of it was about high school wrestling, and then the other half would kind of cover the college scene in the Gophers.
I had never heard about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Minnesota Wrestling Weekly.
So was he the host of it, or was it someone else?
Actually, I think Will Short did it. So Will Short obviously wrestled for Jay and coached with him for a couple of years too. And then at that time he was coaching at Simley, but Will's just unbelievable behind the microphone. I know he's done some Big 12 commentating and some of that stuff too, but he's just so good behind the mic, and he did a great job. It was them. And then there's a news sportscaster, Mike Max, who's been around the Minnesota sports forever. And he was it was him and Will Short that did the broadcast.
That's crazy. I wrestled his son, Ben Short, throughout the years when I was in high school. Is that his son?
Okay.
Jake Short. Sorry. Yeah.
Jake Short. Yep.
Yeah. I think he was, that's, I've heard that name for a while, and I assumed it was all related. So, man, like, you think about that, like, that's cool, because it's not only like wrestling people, like obviously like this podcast, Flow, and everyone else out there, it's great and it's more coverage, but only for the wrestling fans. Like, you're not going to get, like, no average person's just going to stumble upon this podcast or Flow. It's like that news show, you're getting everyone. That's the cool thing about it.
Yeah, it was really cool, really unique for its time, and they did a great job. I mean, it was a professionally done, and they just did a really, really good job with it. And it was pretty cool. At that time, you just couldn't get any wrestling if you wanted, so the wrestling people obviously tuned in, but it got us out there in front of the other audience as well.
Mm-hmm. And when you were being recruited, who was the first one to call? Was it Marty, or was it Jay, or Mark Schwab, or?
I can't remember. I think it was I can't remember if it was Marty or Jay, but it would have been one of those two guys. Those were the guys I talked to probably the most. So it was, again, I laugh now. It was just a different world, because, now that I'm now that we're recruiting and talking to guys, but I'd have to come home from school and you didn't know when they were going to call. You just kind of had to sit home because there were no cell phones or anything. It was just a landline. So you'd come home and you'd just sit at home at night and wait and hope a coach was going to call. And maybe they called on the same day every week or something like that, or every couple of weeks. But it's just, it's crazy how things have changed in the recruiting world.
When a lot of guys talk about, you're probably like 10 years before you, but they're like, I never watched a college duel until I got to college. A lot of people say that, which is like, now you can't even imagine that.
Yeah. I mean, I actually didn't go to my first college match until I was being recruited my senior year.
Wow. See, there you go. It's like,
yeah.
And when you came in, I forget when you came in, they actually did get a trophy in 97, and that was big. And so your true freshman year was 98, 97, 98?
98, 99.
98, 99.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So 99 is the heartbreak year.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. So for folks who haven't watched the documentary and aren't kind of up to speed, just, give them the cliff notes on kind of what happened during that year and like what the expectations were.
Yeah. We had, like you'd mentioned, in 97, we won our first, or they won their first team trophy. And the 98, we were third in 97. We were second in 98, and then 99 was our year, that we were going to win it. And the guys competed super well throughout the entire year. I think Iowa had won 25 Big Ten titles at that time. So they were just, it was theirs. And we went into Big Tens, and I think we beat them by 15 points, something like that, to stop their run of Big Ten titles. And then we went to the national tournament, and it was, we were really set up to win that thing. And things just, I don't think we wrestled terrible. There were just some things that happened that, we had one guy who was seeded fourth, who got upset and then didn't place. And another guy was seeded fourth and got beat first round, came all the way back, ended up seventh. But I think throughout the course of that tournament, there were 16 just random different things that either happened for us or that happened against us, whether it was our guys or other teams that gave up sets that let somebody come through the backside and stuff like that would have made the difference of that point and a half. We ended up losing the tournament. We ended up losing the tournament by a point and a half. And it was, it was devastating for me to be sitting up in the stands. Chad Kraft, who was Minnesota's first 4-time All-American, and he lost in the finals in 98. He sprained his ankle in the first minute of the NCAA finals and couldn't walk. So he ends up losing the NCAA finals, and then he gets upset in the semifinals by a coin flip. He loses the coin flip, loses in the semifinals. And that was just, I spent a lot of time training with him, and it was just heartbreaking to sitting up in the stands. There's nothing you can do about it, right? Like, you're just sitting there, and it was tough to see. We had a great fouling. It was actually at State College. It was out in Penn State that year. But it was, it was devastating to lose that the way we did.
Yeah. And there's another documentary that the J-Rob camp system had done that it's kind of like a niche one, but I found it one time. And in there, Jay gets really vulnerable about, up until this point, he was like always optimistic. The best is yet to come. We're building. But that year, it was just like such a gut punch to him that he was like kind of lost faith for a couple of weeks there afterwards.
Yeah, he was hurting pretty bad. Obviously, I was a young athlete at the time, so he never showed that to us. But I've heard Marty and those guys talk about it, and through some of these documentaries throughout the years, that he was. He had always believed it was going to happen. It was going to happen, and everything was built to that 1999 season. That was our year. We were going to do it. We knocked him off in dual meets. We beat him down in Carver. We beat him at Big Tens. That was the year. And when it didn't happen, he really took that hard. And like you said, he didn't believe it was ever going to happen. It just wasn't meant to be. And he was in a bad place for a little bit. And obviously he pulled himself back together, and we rebounded and were able to do what we did the next few years down the road. So,
well, it's crazy because going into the finals, all you guys, not all, but you had to win 2 of 3, and Coach Eggum had Kale. And it's like, okay. And then I think Hartung won. And then it came down to Stephen Neal, world champ, versus Lesnar. And it's like, man, it's just crazy to think that it could be that close. And then, so 2000, is that your first year in the lineup full
Yeah,
time?
that was my first year.
And so how did it go that year as you guys were kind of rebuilding a little bit?
It was good. We obviously we lost guys like Hartung, Kraft, Holiday. I mean, we had uh, a lot of big shoes to replace and fill there. So we didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but luckily we had those guys around to learn from and to be able to train with and help us. And our young guys really stepped up and did well. I think we had 6 or 7 All-Americans that year and ended up third. So,
wow,
which was really, really good. It kind of kept the ball rolling, even though we didn't win in 99, but even though we didn't win in 99, we knew I think we had 2 or 3 number 1 recruiting classes that were in the room that were coming up. So we knew, even though we lost those superstars that we did, that we had really good guys coming up, and we believed it too, right? Like we were so close for us as young guys, coming up through it. It wasn't like, you hear it a lot, like we can do it, we can do it, we can do it. But we saw guys were there. We saw how they trained. We saw the way Tim and Kraft and Agam and those guys, we saw the way that they trained and the way they approached wrestling and what they did to try to get there. And we knew that if we were following their footsteps and doing what they were doing, that we were going to be able to find a way to make this happen.
Yeah, being around.
If that makes sense.
No, it does, because in that Flow doc, which is amazing, Keepers of the Flame is what it's called for folks who haven't watched it. Really, really good 3-part series. And they talk about basically like Hartung and Kraft, and I had written another guy down for that class. What was that? There was one other guy in there. Apologies, whoever I'm leaving out, but basically those dudes just like set the culture, and it's like you only need a couple guys like that, and then the whole culture changes.
Yeah, yeah.
When did Damian Hahn get there?
He got there the year after I did, so he was a year younger than me.
That's a big one, because that's an out of state big recruit. And I know Lawrence was an out of state big recruit, but his brother was already there, so it's like you're probably feeling good about getting him. But to go to Jersey and get one of the at that time, one of the best, had to be a big swing.
Yeah, it was a big deal, and they, obviously they spent a lot of time in New Jersey, and Marty and Jay and Schwab and those guys out there. I think I heard a story where I think it was Marty and Jay were out there, and it's the way the rules are now. You couldn't be sitting at their house or sitting at the school while they signed the papers. But Marty sent them, or Jay sent them out there, and he said, "You guys do not leave until he commits to Minnesota." So they were out there and it was, again, back then it was a different world. You took visits your senior year. Even when you knew where you were going, you didn't let anybody know till either the signing date or the week before. That was the way it was. Nobody committed early for the most part. So it was like, you got 3 schools that think they got a chance, even though you made your mind up 3 months ago that you're going to this place, but you didn't tell them, and you didn't make that decision, or didn't make that announcement, I guess I should say, till the week of. So I don't know if Damian, I think Damian knew, because you look at, he's going to have Hartung, Agam, those guys to be able to train with. There wasn't a better room in the country for him. And it was, we're sure glad we got him.
What a beast. Oh my God. Just amazing. And when you first got there, you're coming in, again, winningest wrestler ever in Minnesota at that time. But for your transition, how was that first 6 months in the room for you as a young guy?
It was good. It was eye-opening, right? Because at the time, those were number 2, number 3, verge of being number 1 team in the country. So we had a lot of really, really tough, talented guys in the room, and you took your lickings for sure. And it took me, I want to say it took me a month, maybe a month and a half, 2 months, until I got my first takedown in the room, unless I wrestled a guy our age. But for the most part, you'd go with the older guys. I always wanted to grab older, better guys. And it took me a long time to finally get a takedown on those guys. I remember wrestling Kraft all the time, and he would just take it to me. Next thing I know, it's like, okay, I'm getting to his legs. I can't finish, but I'm getting there. And then, a few weeks later, I'm getting there. He's not stuffing me right away. I'm really making him work. I'm, getting close on my second, third attempt, finish to take him down. And then, then slowly, finally you're able to get a takedown and you just build confidence from there. So.
And was the work, like the amount of work you guys are doing, like preseason running training, was it just an insane change for you, or was it what kind of you were ready for it?
No, I was ready for it. It was a lot of work. But again, I got here and that's what everybody did. So I didn't know any different. I was always I feel like I was always a pretty hard worker, but it was just kind of on my own, right? Like if I needed to go for a run or something like that, in high school, I'd go for a run on my own and do those type of things, lift on my own. I didn't have a training schedule, obviously, like we did here, put together for us. So I feel like I had a decent work ethic, but it was I had to learn to grind a little bit.
Because if you watch that, excuse me, I feel like I'm a commercial for this film, but it's just in my mind from last night. But if you watch it, though, one of the things that Marty and Jay talk about is that the first 10 years, it was just pretty much pounding the guys every day, no peaks and valleys. And guys were, by March, they were so ready for it to be done that they were maybe overtrained and a little spent, and that they had to kind of change their ways a little bit. And so you were probably one of those first couple classes where it maybe didn't seem like it to you, but they were kind of backing off a little bit and giving you some peaks and valleys.
Yeah, definitely. I do remember, in the fall, it was, we trained pretty hard, but they gave us probably about 3 weeks a month on our own, where it was just kind of on your own because it was before RTC. So we had captain's practices or whatever, but we actually play a lot of football in the fall too. So that was kind of our getaway, and those were pretty hard because we're all intense competitors. So those got pretty heated at times. Yeah. I remember, this is kind of a funny tidbit, but I remember one time we were playing and Hartung and Kraft were on the opposite sides. And again, they were both pretty big competitors, and can't remember what happened or how the play happened, but Crafty wasn't happy with it. He like kicked over at Hartung, and Hartung stopped and looks at him and he goes, "Did you just try to kick me?" Crafty goes, "Yep, and I'll do it again." I don't know. That's just a really funny tidbit to those football games that we played. But we always, on Wednesdays we played football in the afternoon, and it wasn't just us wrestlers. The coaches were there too. So it was really a team thing that we played. But yeah, and Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday we grinded pretty hard in the fall, and then obviously we went hard in the season too. But I think that's where the coaches, again, I wasn't there prior to that, but over the years listening to them talk and how they figured out the kind of peaking cycle of it, and when to let guys rest and when to take it down a notch. And obviously it seemed to have worked out there towards the end. So
yeah, well, and like you mentioned coaches, and I just love this staff that was put together. It's such a kind of like a hodgepodge. You'd like, how did these guys all get there? You got Joe Russell, and you got Mark Schwab, and then you got Marty and Jay, which makes sense to me. But it sounds like a lot of the guys, like the Crafts and those guys, were they staying around as kind of like volunteer assistant, like helping out as well?
Yeah, we were like, we kind of had an RTC before there was RTCs back then. They stayed around. We had what you would call administrative assistants, and that's where Jay was really good. He found a way to keep all these guys around. They'd get paid a little bit of money through the university. It wasn't much at all, but to stay around and be able to be in the practices because they were here at the university. And he just kept as many of those guys around as he could. And I think that staff, those core four, so Jay, Marty, Schwab, and Russell, they were together for sure the 7 years in a row that we won, in that period that we won. They might have been like 10, 12 years together. That entire staff was together, which was pretty unique back then, and probably even more unique now that you get a staff that stays together that long.
Except for your staff. I was looking at the Minnesota list today. I'm like, oh my God, everyone's on staff. Trevor's a little bit younger, but yeah, man, you and Coach Eggum have been there like 20 something years. Like, crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that we've, I think it's something special to be able to wrestle here, stay here, and being able to coach here now. We've been through the program. We've been through Jay and Marty and those guys' system. we've kind of developed it into our own system here, and we're really excited where we're at right now. Obviously having Sanders on staff, and then we brought Trevor on. I think Trevor's on his 5th year here now in the program, but it's nice to have an outside perspective, someone who's been in a different program, coach somewhere else, to pull into our Minnesota system here. And then obviously we had Coach Slater, who was our RTC coach, and he stepped away and we brought on Coach Steiner. So he's been awesome to have on board as well.
Coach Steiner's there.
Yeah.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah,
man, I totally forgot about that. Shame on me. That's and shout out to Zach Sanders. Absolutely love the guy. One of my favorites. He was one of the early guys to come on the show, and man, he's the best. Yeah,
he's great. He really, everything he does in his life is for wrestling, and is, especially now he's done competing, but before that, I think even some guys think he's a little nuts, right? But he wanted to be the best, and he was going to do whatever it took, from his sleep to the way he ate, and just everything he did about the way he planned out his day was about his training and to be the best competitor he could be.
How much film did Zach Sanders watch and currently watch?
Still does a ton, man. If you need to know anything about a light guy in the world, he's got notes on him.
Wow. Now, was he part of that 08 championship, or was it 07 or 08 when they won again?
No, he's a little bit later than that. He's was
the 13 class.
Yeah, he graduated in 12.
Okay.
So he was part of, I think he got there. He might've been a freshman in that 07, 08 years. And then his senior year, we were finally able to get back and bring another trophy back to Minnesota.
Yeah, that's right. Because there was he and then Thorne was a 4-time All-American. There was a really good group that he had come through with at that time.
Yeah. So.
And then, so just while we're on the topic of coaches, what's it been like working with Coach Steiner, getting some new perspective in there?
It's great. He's been a head coach at another program. He's been head assistant at a couple different programs. He's got so much knowledge for the sport, and he knows how to communicate with our athletes really, really well. And it's just been great having him on. And I know our senior level guys really enjoy working with him. And he does a great job putting a plan together and getting it figured out for their training and all that. So it's been it was just kind of a freak thing. When Fresno did what they did, he and his wife decided they have some family here in Minneapolis, so they just decided to move to Minneapolis. He just really kind of showed up in our back door, and then it just worked out that we're able to get him and bring him on staff. So with the RTC.
Awesome. Well, it's exciting because, and just another guy of that caliber to have around, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Now, when I think back to your career, I want to hit on the NCAA finals, of course. Excuse me. But tell me about the year there was the Target Center duel, because that's the year the season was following Iowa. And I was in middle school at this time, and I probably watched the season as much as anyone. It was just the best documentary ever. And there's the clip of Leroy Vega shaving his head before the duel. I mean, God, that duel was awesome. So what year was that for you?
So that would have been, I believe that was 2000. Was that 2001 or 2002? I can't remember.
It was the year where Zadok beat Lawrence.
Zadok beat Lawrence. So that would have been 2001, 2001 or 2.
Okay.
I can't remember. We did one at the Target Center and one at the Excel Center, but I know that first one, it had to have been 2001.
Because the Target Center is where the pro basketball team plays, right?
Yeah, it's where the Timberwolves play downtown, yeah.
I mean, and that, to have 15,000 in that's special. I mean,
yeah, it was pretty amazing. Jay had always talked about that. And again, Jay, coming from Iowa, he always wanted to beat those guys. Didn't matter if it was on the mat or if it was in attendance or whatever it was, right? Like there was kind of that he just wanted to be the best, and he wanted to beat those guys at everything. So that's why we went down there, because we didn't have a facility big enough to be able to do it here on campus, even though Williams Arena holds, I think, like 13,500. But he wanted to go break the record, which was maybe 15 at the time. I think we had like 16,500 people at that Target Center duel, which was pretty amazing. They did just a tremendous job getting fans in and the atmosphere. And, that was before they did any light shows or any of that stuff, so it was really unique for a wrestling event to have that type of stuff.
Was there a platform?
There was, yep. They put it up on a stage. There was a platform, where the floor was. They brought chairs all the way right up next to the stage, and it was a crazy atmosphere. And they actually, I think the fans had quite a bit of fun too, because it wasn't on a college campus. It was downtown Minneapolis, so they had alcohol there too. They had beer sales, so the fans were enjoying themselves as well.
Love it, getting a little rowdy.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, it was quite the atmosphere.
Man, what a and just to think that, probably 12 years earlier, maybe a couple hundred people are going, and then 15,000. Like that can happen though anywhere. Like that just shows you, like if you're, not just you have to put in the time, but man, Jay, you just got to tip your hat to how much of an innovator he was as a promoter. Forget the wrestling, he's a promoter.
Yeah, he was. He really, it wasn't, again, it wasn't just about the mat stuff. It was building the sport, bringing in the fans and doing whatever he could. Marty always makes the joke when he wrestled here, there were 200 fans in the stands and 100 of them were his family members. So
a good segue to Coach Morgan, because, everyone knows Jay, Hall of Famer, one of the pillars of wrestling, I would say. But, Coach Morgan, I'm sure he was really in there running a lot of the practices and whatnot. Like, what was his philosophy to training back then? And like, what was his role?
Yeah, I think, he was, he was obviously the head assistant at the time, and he was as hard. He was the first guy under Jay to come through and actually win a national title. So he had been there for us. So for us that were coming up through it, and I'd say even the Hard Tongues and the Crafts and those guys, they respected Marty so much because he had done it, right? Like he was able to do it, and he was a hard-nosed guy. When you were in the room, he was also, he was a good friend to us as well too. It wasn't just in the wrestling room. It wasn't just a relationship in the wrestling room. It really was like almost like a father figure. All those guys were to us. And I think that's what made them so unique. It wasn't just in the room. It was, we were a family, we were a brotherhood, and they would do anything for us on or off the mat. But, yeah, he was really intense, and you had a lot of respect for Marty, and we joke, he would always, like, you couldn't tell if he was serious or not. He was always playing Jedi mind tricks on however he wanted to get something out of you or get you to do something, or it was just, he was always messing with you. It wasn't comfortable if you had to go sit in his office. And even if it was, even if it was all of them, even if it was a good, it was just the year, or we, in the fall and in the spring, we'd go in and sit in their offices and have just kind of checkups to see where we're at, what we need to do, where we need to get to. And it was always uncomfortable, especially when Marty was standing there. He's just such a massive man staring over top of you. And always had that kind of an angry look on his face, but he was great. He'd do anything for it.
So what did he go on and become a UFC trainer, or was he like involved with Brock's WWE stuff? Like what led to him retiring from coaching?
Yeah. He had, I can't remember. I think it was maybe 2001. He had his first son. So they were starting to have kids now and have a family, and had a really unique opportunity with Brock. When Brock jumped into the UFC, and Brock asked him to train him. So he spent, I think, I want to say for a year or two, he was kind of, when Brock was training, he was doing that while he was coaching. And it just got to the point where he couldn't do both. He really enjoyed, I shouldn't say this. He had, I don't know, maybe he would say it or not, but he had kind of done everything you can in the wrestling coaching world, right? He'd won national titles and with the team, and it was a really unique opportunity, and Brock wanted him to go train him. So, and then he was able to spend more time with his family at the same time. As college coach, and as you know, there's a lot of nights and weekends, and it's hard on families sometimes. So it was an opportunity for him to step away from the wrestling side of it and get into this. And then he did that for many years while Brock was training. And then at the same time he was doing that, he developed, into his real estate that he does now. So
Got it. Okay.
he's
So
got a
that's
real estate company that he runs. Yeah. And he's very successful. So.
got it. Yeah, man, that's to think about that staff together though. And you mentioned your roommate was Jared Lawrence, which
Yeah.
until I interviewed him, I would see matches of him. I would see him. I was scared of him. Like he's like just intense, man. Like,
yeah.
And so I'm sure you guys had some scraps being away apart. I mean, what was that like being around him in those early years?
Yeah, it was great. Again, I learned so much for him over the years, just from the way he trained. Obviously I feel he's one of the best technical coaches out there. He's just, he knows his stuff. And I was more of a strength power guy. So I learned a lot from him, but also just his mentality and the way he looked at wrestling. He was going out there just to compete, and he was going to go as hard as he could. And he was, I was probably a little bit more intense isn't the right word, but just kind of focused in where he could relax and have a good time and, turn the switch off and on a little bit. So later in my career, I learned a lot from him that way. But I remember being freshmen in the dorm room, sitting up, in our beds, and we were talking and dreaming about winning national titles as a team and as individuals. So I think having someone like that around me that, and he had a ton of success coming out right away. It took me about halfway through that first year to kind of figure things out, but he came out of the gate swinging, and he was having a ton of success. And I learned a lot at the way he attacked the sport and the way he thought about things. It was pretty special to be able to have him, the weight before me. And usually he was out there dismantling a guy and breaking a guy because he wrestled so hard. So it was a lot easier for me to step out there and compete once somebody saw what Jared just did to the guy in front of him.
It's funny you say that he could be a little more relaxed though, and turn it on and turn it off. I never knew that.
Yeah, he was just kind of, he trained his butt off, but he was just a little bit, he didn't let the little stuff get to him. Like I was maybe more of a little bit of a worrier and some of that stuff. So, it was just nice to see the way he approached matches and competition and that.
And he obviously had some battles with Mike Zadek. What do you remember about that rivalry back in the day?
Yeah, man, it was really intense. Those guys went back and forth a ton. I can't remember exactly how many won, but they were usually, the weird thing is I remember going back and watching them, but I never really got to see Jared wrestle a ton.
Oh yeah.
Cause I was in the back. Yeah. Cause I'm warming up and getting ready, unless it was, we'd go back and watch film afterwards, but, I didn't get to see a lot of those matches. I'm in the tunnel and I'm hearing, the crowd going crazy. I'm trying to figure out what's going on up there. Who did Jared score? Did Zadok score? So it was, but yeah, those guys were intense. Two guys that wrestled extremely hard, and the way those guys went at it was pretty awesome.
Was that at 49?
That was at 49. Yeah.
How the hell was Zadok making the 33 for the Olympics or whatever he was making? Like that doesn't even make sense to me.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know how he shrunk his body down like that.
I didn't even put that together until right now. I'm like, wait, what weight was that at? That's insane.
Yeah.
Man, and then you had some matches with one of my childhood heroes, TJ Williams, being from Illinois. Williams brothers, get out of here. They were unbelievable. And I had heard Kyle Klingman talk about this, but you had a pretty epic match with TJ your freshman year at Minnesota.
Yep, at Minnesota. And it was, I think it was probably like, I don't know, number 1 versus number 3 as far as the duel. So it was a big match. I believe Zadok beat Jared that time, that duel. And that was when Wes Hand pinched Brock and threw Brock to his back and got a 4-point or 5-point throw. So Brock lost a hand that time too, and we ended up losing the duel. But anyhow, yeah, TJ and I had a really good match there. Kind of crazy. So we wrestled on Friday night. This was a Sunday duel, and on Friday night we wrestled Northwestern, and we were down in a high school down southern Minnesota, down by Crafty's hometown, and wrestling Northwestern guy, and I popped my knee. So I it was pretty sore. We woke up the next day, we came into workout, and I couldn't even shoot. I couldn't even hit a knee. So we're trying to figure out, I got to wrestle, right? Like I need to wrestle to help us try to win the duel. So trying to figure out, maybe the doc would be in the morning. Maybe I get a shot in my knee. We'll figure it out. Got down to weight. And I remember before I went home that night, I was talking about Marty being Jedi mind trick guy. Before I went home that night, he asked me how I was doing. I was like, I just don't know, Marty. It's really bothering me. I can't even hit a knee right now. He's like, remember, 90% of the pain is in your head. I went to bed that night. I woke up, my knee felt like $1,000,000. I didn't need to tape it, put a sleeve on it. Now it bothered me the rest of the year, but some reason for that match, I woke up that morning, I was ready to go. Maybe it was just the adrenaline. Maybe Marty got in my head or whatever. But yeah, so we had
You're a freshman at the time?
I'm a freshman. Yeah. Redshirt freshman. So
TJ's the defending champ.
He's the defending champ. Yep. So yeah, wow. It was kind of a crazy match. I think he got up by like 5 points in the first period. Maybe it was up by 5 points going into the third period. And I ended up getting a stall call on him and getting a takedown. And then or maybe he tried to throw me. I had double unders or something like that. He tried to throw me. And then there must have been like 15 seconds left in the match. I got in on a shot. I was down by 1 point, I believe. Maybe I was, down by 1 point. I got in on a shot and put 2 or 3 things together and got a takedown. It's like 5 seconds left. And then Williams hits his switch that he got me with every time. And it wasn't like he switched to get out. When he hit his switch, he like trapped your arm in there and you couldn't get out. He got a reversal almost every time if he hit it and got your arm stuck in there. And I don't know. I'm out there wrestling, right? But apparently the rumor is they called time and the girl who was supposed to hit the ref like swiped and missed him and then went out and hit him again. And then by that time they had given him 2 reversal. Maybe it shouldn't have been 2. Maybe, right. Maybe it should have just been an escape. But anyhow, he ends up winning by a point. But it was, wow. I think it was finally I had, as I mentioned, I'd started out pretty slow my freshman year. For what reason, I don't really know, but I started out being like ranked 18th in the country, and I was so focused on winning or losing. Should I beat this guy? Shouldn't I beat this guy? And I started losing. I got beat out of the Cliff Keen. I lost to the Division II national champ from NDSU in the duel. Just was having a terrible year. And, luckily I was able to kind of I just quit focusing on rankings, winning that. I just went out and worried about wrestling. And this is where Jay really got to me. And he's like, you can't control any of that stuff. You can't control if your hand gets raised. Only thing you control is your attitude and effort when you step out on the mat. And I started doing that. And I just started worrying about wrestling as hard as I could for 7 minutes. I started doing it down in the practice room. And not that, I would just say, okay, I'm going to go as hard as I can. If I can go for 2 minutes, that is what it is. And I just started building off that. And then I started doing it in competition. And, slowly I started to knock off a few ranked guys here and there. And that was really, the match that I think I really believe that I was right there with all the top guys in the country, because I came so close to beating TJ there. So
and he was 98-1.
Yeah. He was the one guy we had a few close matches throughout the years in dual meets, but the one guy I never was able to beat. I will say he beat me pretty bad a few times too. So
was the Big Ten's rematch later that year?
Yeah.
In the finals, Big Ten finals or semis or
Big Ten finals. Yep. I think
you made the finals as a freshman at the Big Tens.
Yeah. He beat me my freshman year and my sophomore year in the Big Ten finals. So,
yeah, I mean, but like, it's cool that match kind of was a little bit of a turning point for you. And man, afterwards at the bars of Minneapolis, Minnesota fans were like, they swiped the towel wrong. Like that little scenario was probably talked about for weeks after that duel.
Oh, I'm sure. So,
and then, you mentioned that a lot of times when Lawrence was wrestling, you're in the tunnel, and I want to go to like nationals. You're 2002, your junior year. So you're in the tunnel. What did you have like a routine of like what you were thinking or what you were saying to yourself, or like what was your mental state before a big match like that?
Just trying to focus on, again, attitude and effort when I stepped out there. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk out there. I'm going to I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to go out and just wrestle. And I think that's when I was wrestling my best. The times I got focused on what I was going to do or what he was going to do, I didn't wrestle my best. I feel like I was a pretty good, like, feel wrestler in positions, and I could scramble through stuff pretty good. But if I was too focused on trying to do a certain thing, I never wrestled my best. So it was just trying to stay calm and go out there and just go out there and wrestle as hard as I could for 7 minutes, and the rest was going to take care of itself. So that was kind of my attitude before I went out there. It was kind of another little tidbit or story. So we're getting warmed up. It was Jared, myself, and Ryan Lewis was actually in the finals that year too. So we have our little spot back in the tunnel, and we're getting our stuff on, getting ready to get warmed up before the NCAA finals. And you would think we were all, we were super nervous and all worried, but we were all super, super relaxed, and we were joking around, having a good time. We were talking about, like, okay, you walk up the steps. This is how you got to stomp your foot on the mat. It wasn't technique. How are we going to win? What are we going to do? It's like, all right, you got to make sure when you get up there, you got, one, don't trip, but two, you got to get up here, you take one step on the mat, you stomp with your left foot. And that's how our group was back there before we were getting ready to go out and wrestle in the NCAA finals. It was pretty funny, relaxed. And that's where I think our coaches did a great job with keeping us calm and relaxed, and just excited to go out and compete.
And those gold singlets were awesome. I mean, I love them. I love both Minnesota singlets from that era. Just the classic maroon with the gold M, and then the gold singlets were also just badass.
Yeah, that was it. That was we were told all the time. So it used to be, when I was competing, it was Big Tens and NCAAs you could wear the gold singlet, because at the time, Big Tens, it was only the finals. There were no third and fifth place matches going at the same time. Okay. So you could wear it, and it wasn't the final round. It was only the finals. So, and then when they switched it, and at the Big Tens, they started doing third and fifth at the same time, then it was very hit and miss on whether we could wear the gold singlet in the finals, because you start to get point deductions if you get warnings and point deductions, because when the singlets switch back and forth.
Okay.
So it was only that. It was Big Tens and NCAAs. And when you got your the first time you probably even saw the singlet, the gold singlet, was when you got to go to Big Tens. And it was the rule was, don't put it on till you make the Big Ten finals. Once you make the Big Ten finals, then you can try it on, see how it fits, see how it looks. So that was
so like media day, you're not trying on the gold singlet, like none of that, huh?
No. Well, there probably was no media day back then, but
right.
Yeah, but no, it wasn't. I didn't get to put that on until I made the Big Ten finals my freshman year, and then I was able to try it on. And
wow, amazing. Now there's 2001 we could talk about, and we're winding down here, but we could talk about that for all day, all day. Everyone's heard the 0-6. Everyone's heard Damian hitting the spike or see. Yeah. I just love all of it. What's when you think about 01, obviously first time anyone's won with 10 All-Americans, and it hasn't happened since. What's your fond memory of that event that comes to mind when people talk about that tournament?
It was really, I think the most amazing thing for me was that we were all able to come together, right? Like we had to come through a lot of adversity, as far as, there were 6 guys in the semifinals that you get your dreams crushed to go to the national finals. And we went back that night, and everyone's super bummed and super disappointed. And we're sitting in the hotel room, and all of a sudden you hear the coaches, start saying, hey guys, this isn't over. This isn't over. We have 10 guys wrestling back in the morning. We can score an unbelievable amount of points. Like, we got to keep our heads up. We got to be ready to go. And once we came out of that meeting that night, like we were fired up. We were like, hey, none of us got a chance to do this as an individual. We can win this thing as a team here. And so we woke up that next morning, and this story's probably been told too, but we come down to the vans, and you got Hartung, Kraft, and Eggum sitting in the vans ready to drive us that morning. And Crafty's got Who Let the Dogs Out blaring on the radio at like 5:30 in the morning. As we get in the vans, we drive over to the arena, and the rest is history from there. But that was one of the funnest moments that I can remember, that we were, sitting in that meeting where we were all so disappointed that how did, we had it. This was ours to win here, but we weren't gonna lose it. We weren't gonna let it sneak away like it did in 99. And waking up that morning, guys were so excited to be able to go out and compete, and realized if we just went out and took care of what we could individually, that the team thing was going to take care of itself. And every one of us did it that morning.
And you think about those three guys driving the van, like they had been scorned, like you were almost doing it for them a little bit, right? Like those are like the captains taking you into battle.
Yeah, I say all the time, I mean, I'm so honored and love to be being a part of that 2001 team, right? But there were so many people that led the way leading up to that, the Hartons, the Crafts, the guys that came before them that had kind of paved the way for us. We were the fortunate 10 that were in the position to be able to go out there and do it. But there were a lot of guys, alumni throughout the years, from alumni, the alumni that started way back before Jay even got here. It wasn't, this wasn't a championship just for us. It was for all those other guys as well too. And to me, that's the special part about, I always feel like the team thing, what we're able to do as a team, both in 2001, 2002, and, again in 2007, those are more special than any individual titles.
Yeah. And 02, I mean, you win it, team wins it. It's like, now it's like you're winning them back. It seems like, probably is going to go on forever. And then Oklahoma State, they kind of pop on and have one of the best 4-year runs ever. And then in 07, how did it happen in 07? I really don't know a lot about that year. Like, how'd you guys pull it out, the team title that year?
Yeah, we had, again, it was very similar, I'd say, to the, I like to use the 99 and then, our class teams, where we were just so solid. We had from up and down the lineup, we were just so solid. And we came in, we went out to I don't even know what they are. We did some duels out in Albany, New York. And we wrestled Hofstra, first dual meet of the year. And we get beat by Hofstra. We got second in 2006. We're projected to be the #1 team, win a national title, and we come out and we get beat in the first dual meet of the year. Yeah, we lose to Hofstra in the first dual meet of the year. Some crazy upsets, and I think I'm pretty sure we had our entire lineup in too. It just, I don't know. We lost some matches, we were winning some matches, and we get beat by Hofstra. And
that was Tom Ryan's night of his life.
Yes, yeah.
He's probably at Hofstra at that time.
Yeah.
Or maybe actually, by then he's probably at Ohio State. But okay, so
he would have been at Ohio State by then. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So after that, you guys, was it bumpy all season, or did you kind of rebound from there on?
Yeah,
out?
Then we rebounded, and then we just started rolling. Obviously we had, you had Mac Ryder, Kish, CP Slater, Dustin Slater came in as a true freshman and just lit the world on fire. He actually lost 3-2 match. Those duels, it was a dual tournament, not against Hofstra, but against, I think it was Oklahoma Stornolio. I think was his first loss. And then he just went on a tear from there. And yeah, it was pretty awesome, because like you said, Oklahoma State had gone on this, the run that they did where they won 4 straight. And we had actually had, Jay had Dan Gable come up and do our coaches clinic that fall. And he brought in, and we knew we were right there. And he talked to our team, and Gable's a pretty straightforward guy, and he's like, "Hey guys, I'm not telling you can't do it, but all I see is a sea of orange." He says, "I only see a sea of orange." And then he went on to give us some motivational stuff too. But yeah, and then we were able to, we dueled them twice that year. One time at the national duels, and then we went down there in Oklahoma City, and because I think that they had a duel in Oklahoma City where we dueled them. Because the Nationals might have been down there a couple years later. Anyway, so yeah, we beat them down there in the duel, and the national duel one was pretty amazing, because that was when Cole Conrad throws Mako and pins Mako to win the duel in the national duels.
What is it with Minnesota heavyweights pinning people at the national duels? You had
we got the best heavyweights, man. You want to be a great heavyweight, you gotta come.
There's
come to
no
Minnesota.
question, but literally though, like Shelton Benjamin, the year before Lesnar gets there, pins West Hand. Minnesota wins the national duels. The next year, Lesnar pins West Hand again, wins the national duels. Like, what the hell is that? That's crazy.
Yeah.
And like as we're reminiscing on this, like it just makes me kind of sad that we don't have the best programs wrestle multiple times a year anymore. Like the national duels, like you guys were going all the time, like Oklahoma State, Iowa, Minnesota. It just, I don't know. Yeah, I know we're in a different era and it's all good. And I love the era we're in, but man, you talk about all these matches happening in a short period of time too, you know?
Yeah. I'd love to bring the national duels back. I don't know how you do it. If you do it, you got to get everybody on board. And again, that's where I'll always praise Jay. There were years, no doubt about it, that maybe it wasn't in our best interest as a team to wrestle in the national duels, but he felt it was what's best for the sport and help grow the sport, because dual meets are a big deal, and we were going to be in it no matter what. So
yeah, love it, man. Well, it's been so fun to talk, Coach, and we haven't got to talk about the current Gophers, so I want to spend just last question on this is, I know you guys had a big win last night and getting ready for Okie State on Sunday, which I just think it's so cool that Oklahoma State and Minnesota wrestle. I mean, I know it goes back to Jay going there, and and props to John Smith for putting it on the calendar, and obviously you guys too. So talk about this to your squad a little bit. What are you excited for, and what are you looking for?
Yeah, we're excited, man. We really have, we got a really good mix of our veterans and our old guys who are really competing really well now. And then we have a group of young guys that are coming up that we're really excited about too. And they're only starting to scratch the surface here a little bit. And, we haven't had them all in together yet. This weekend, the plan is to have all those guys in together and competing. And, but yeah, we're excited about where we're at. We have a super, super great, hard-nosed group of guys right now that love the sport. They want to win, and they want to bring trophies back to Minnesota. So we're excited about where we're at. It's going to be a great duel this weekend. There's a lot of really interesting matchups, really close matchups, and you can see where they're favored, where we're favored. And then there's these toss-up matches. So it's going to be a fun duel. It always is. It's always great to go down there and compete against those guys, because they bring it all the time too. And
it's at Stillwater.
It's at Stillwater. Yeah.
Wow. Going to Gallagher, Iowa. I love it.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. It's going to be good. I'm excited about this duel, and I'm excited about getting into the scuffle and having our guys compete there, and then getting into our Big Ten season. Because I really feel our guys are only going to get better as the season goes on.
And it's cool you guys do a little California trip in between there too, just to kind of switch things up a little bit. Yeah,
it'll be nice to get those guys out there, and we'll have a tough duel out there. Cal Poly, they're wrestling well. They got some really good individuals as well too, and we have a handful of guys from California on the team too. So
really?
We've been doing a lot of recruiting out in California, so it'll be nice for those guys to get home and get back out that way and wrestle for their families. So.
Well, awesome. Coach Becker, man, it's been an absolute pleasure. You're welcome back on anytime. I just want to thank you for coming on the show. Last question is, wrestling changed my life. How did wrestling change your life, or how has it impacted your life?
Well, really, it just like, I come from a small town, and, I think if it weren't for wrestling, I don't know if who knows if I would have went to college or not, so I was fortunate enough to be able to come to college, and man, it's amazing where wrestling's taken me from. I've been able to travel all over the world because of it. I've been able to be a part of some things that are really, really special and really unique that the average people don't get to be a part of. And then, I get to be here and be a mentor for these young athletes that are coming up. And I think that's the most special thing for me, is being able to help these young guys come up and try to accomplish their dreams. So yeah, pretty fortunate to be able to, to be part of this sport, just because I brought home a letter from school, and it's pretty awesome.
For sure, man. Well, I'm sure glad we could connect, and, wish you guys nothing but the best this year. Love the Gophers, and, give Zach my best.
I will. Appreciate it, Ryan. I'll come back on anytime you want me.
Appreciate it, brother. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.